This morning, my question, is it too late to put the marijuana genie back in the bottle? Plus, who is Senator Mitch McConnell really running against? And the whole gritty city of New Orleans like you've never seen it before. But first, the latest bogus line out of Washington is just a matter of trust. Good morning, I'm Joy Reid, in today for Melissa Harris Perry. This week, our representatives in Congress managed to pull off a feat that seemed nearly impossible just a few months ago. They did their job and passed actual legislation with no brinksmanship, no hostage-taking, and no shutdown shenanigans. Both houses of Congress voted to let the U.S. continue borrowing money to pay the nation's bills. Free the American people from having to hear the words debt ceiling showdown until at least March of 2015. In fact, the clean debt ceiling bill was just the latest example of how our lawmakers can play nicely with one another when they want to. In December, they came together on a bipartisan budget agreement. And just last month, they compromised on a $1 trillion spending plan and the passage, finally, of the Farm Bill. But before you get all excited and think bipartisanship and functioning government are breaking out all over, permit me to dim your optimism for just a minute, because our newly cooperative Congress just hit another wall. Just a few weeks ago, it seemed like immigration reform would be the next on the list of things Congress finds a way to compromise and get something done on. House Republicans were suddenly striking a different tone versus last year when they rejected a bipartisan Senate bill on immigration, and House Speaker John Boehner refused to even bring up the bill in the House. So it was a sign of progress when just 2 weeks ago, House Republicans emerged from a policy retreat with their own blueprint for immigration legislation. But then came this surprise announcement just 1 week later from Speaker Boehner.
Listen, there's widespread doubt about whether this administration can be trusted to enforce our laws. And it's going to be difficult to move any immigration legislation until that changes.
So in just 1 week's time, the GOP, who had seemingly gone from let's make a deal to deals off. And Republicans were giving one explanation for their change of heart: trust issues. More specifically with President Obama, who's been locked out of the Republican circle of trust. So now the new narrative for Republican resistance goes like this. Republicans were willing to deal on the multi-trillion-dollar budget and the once toxic debt ceiling. But because the GOP has trust issues with the president, we can't have nice things like immigration reform. Other Republicans have joined Speaker Boehner in selling the about why they can't trust this president. And it comes down to one word, the one ring to rule them all in the 2014 elections: Obamacare.
There is a real trust deficit right now that the Speaker is facing, and it's related to Obamacare and the disastrous rollout. Because let's think about it. Immigration means doing a lot of complex things well. And in addition to that, the administration keeps issuing executive orders to change the law very frequently. So I think there's a trust deficit that's related.
Here's the issue that all Republicans agree on. We don't trust the president to enforce the law.
Meanwhile, last month, at a breakfast with reporters organized by the Wall Street Journal, Florida Senator Marco Rubio explained what he said were the other reasons his fellow Republicans don't trust the president. They pointed to the IRS scandal, the Benghazi stuff, and then the NSA revelations, and then the Obamacare decisions by this administration as evidence of how the government and this administration unilaterally decides which portions of the law to enforce and which ones not to enforce. And that further undermines. You see what Senator Rubio just did there? The same menu of conspiracy theories and faux Obama scandals that animate the far right have become the excuse for not doing policy that's in Republicans' own long-term interests when it comes to immigration. And Republicans plan to ride this trust narrative into the November elections. But there are a couple of problems with this argument. First, the GOP's explanation that they can't trust President Obama to enforce the law simply isn't supported by his record, because the fact is that no president has been tougher on enforcing immigration laws than this president. Take a look at this chart. The rate of annual deportations was higher under President Obama's first term than it was during any year of the entire George W. Bush administration. Today, more than 1,100 immigrants on average are deported daily under this administration. So at the current rate, the Obama administration is this year to surpass a total of 2 million deportations. Okay, problem number 2. It's that Speaker Boehner and the Republicans are not acting in a vacuum. In fact, immigration advocates are promising to make sure that there's no vacuum at all. In a conference call this week, the spokeswoman for the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, Kica Matos, made this promise to House Republicans, saying, quote, "Let me just be clear about one thing. From now on, any lawmaker who does not support comprehensive immigration reform should expect relentless and constant confrontations that will escalate until they agree to support immigration reform." In other words, Republicans may not trust President Obama, but if they refuse to act on immigration reform, they can trust that there will be political pushback. And joining me now are Caton Dawson, a Republican consultant and former chair of the South Carolina GOP, Christina Greer, assistant professor of political science at Fordham University, Kica Matos, the aforementioned head of the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, and she's also the director of the Immigrant Rights and Racial Justice at the Campaign for Community Change, and Raul Reyes, who is an attorney and USA Today columnist and also my pal. Thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. And Kica, I do want to start with you because you are the one who issued what we could call that challenge, I guess you could say, or maybe that threat to Republicans, that essentially you either do immigration reform or you're going to face opposition. Tell me what that's about and why you're also saying even people who are for immigration reform in the GOP may be targets.
Sure. Look, you know, this is an issue where you have a lot of bipartisan support. Unlike many other policy issues that get debated in Congress, there is a sense on the part of both Democrats and Republicans that we have to move on reform. We have had for nearly 30 years a broken immigration system. And last year, the advocates played nice. You know, we engaged with Republican legislators. We did a lot of lobbying. We did a lot of education. We did a lot of in-district work. Yes, we had rallies. Yes, we had acts of civil disobedience. But for the most part, our strategy was to really move both parties and to move Congress so that we could finally get reform done and so people could stop suffering. And it felt like we made a lot of progress, right? We had a bill pass the Senate, and then the House has a bill that has 196 co-sponsors. Speaker Boehner, near the end of the year, hired a very highly regarded policy expert. They released the principles, and then all of a sudden, they throw cold water. And we feel like we've had enough. Our communities have suffered too much, and now it's time to engage in some hardball. And we're going to do hardball in 2 different ways. One is we're going to really escalate our advocacy in Congress, but also we are going to really ramp up our civic engagement efforts. And we're going to work to make sure that our communities go out to vote and that we register people to vote.
And, you know, Caton, I want to go to you because it did seem that for a moment John Boehner was trying to move the caucus in the direction of doing immigration reform. As Kica mentioned, he even hired a highly regarded pro-immigration advocate. And then he did suddenly, it was sort of whiplash. He kind of snapped back in the other direction. Why do you think that happened? And do you think Republicans really can ride out 2014 without doing something on immigration?
Well, I think they're going to ride out 2014 and focus back on the winning issues. I'm with you and understand we're now inside the window, and I think what people are missing here in electoral politics is we now have filing in March.
Right.
So, and I never fault a politician on either side for wanting to keep their job. I mean, I don't. And so now we get inside the window of, we've got factions in the Republican Party. I mean, that big tent's got holes all in it right now. And so we've got elected officials sitting there getting ready to go file. I think you'll watch after the filings in March, and both parties have. So, and it's a hot issue both ways. It cuts both ways in the party right now. So let's get March out of the way. I think Speaker Boehner's doing a marvelous job. I do. A lot of people might not like him. I like Speaker Boehner, and I like Newt Gingrich. 2 remarkable speakers and notable in the Republican Party. So I knew y'all wouldn't, but I'm okay with that. So I do think watch after the March filings. Let's get some things situated. The Republicans are not going to lose the House. That's a pipe dream on their side. And we've got 2014 issues, and that's why talking about trust issues with the president is good politics for our party.
And I mean, Raul, just to that point, to Caton's point, if you look at where Hispanic voters are concentrated, right, it is most decidedly, with the exception of Texas, not where Republicans are now facing primaries, right? So we have a map that I can show you that sort of gives you the cluster of sort of Hispanic concentration in these congressional districts. And so to Caton Dawson's point, if you're playing sort of smart primary politics, knowing people can file in March, Republicans are doing just that, right? They're doing what's right for them politically in the primaries.
They're doing what may be right for them in the primaries.